Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some Epic History TV. Still not doing the Napoleon's Marshals because I just want a break from Napoleon. We've had plenty of Napoleon on this channel. I'm tired of that Frenchman, okay? He has plenty of things about him. I want to see other things. This is the Russian Revolution, 1917, by Epic History TV. Now, before we dive into the video, make sure you go check out the links below in my description box or in my pinned comment in the comment section. I have a link to my Twitch channel and a link to my gaming channel here on YouTube. Would love it if you threw me a follow on both of those. And yeah. Now, I don't think we've watched this video yet. I know we have watched the Russian series, parts 1 through 5, Rurik to Revolution. I don't think that covered the Russian Revolution. If it did, whoopsies. I forget everything that happened in it, so we're going to watch this. So if I've already watched it, I don't care. This is my channel. I'm going to do what I want. I want to watch the Russian Revolution. Well, Revolution of 1917. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I shall never agree to a representative form of government because I consider it harmful to the people whom God has entrusted to my care. You didn't really do a good job of caring for your people, did you, Nicholas? Didn't do that good of a job.
In 1894, Nicholas II became ruler of a Russian empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific. Inhabited by 126 million people from 194 ethnic groups.
Ooh.
It was a country in which workers and peasants lived in poverty and hardship, while Russia's elite, its imperial family and aristocracy, lived lives of gilded luxury. There was a long history of struggle in Russia against the injustices of the system. And in 1905, a revolution forced the Tsar to allow the creation of a State Duma, or National Assembly. But its power was limited, and the compromise pleased neither the Tsar nor the reformers. In 1914, this divided empire was plunged into fresh crisis by World War.
It's crazy how much he looks exactly like George V. Yeah, I think it's King George V, who was King of England at the time, or King of Britain at the time. They're cousins, but they look so much alike. Like you could argue that they could be twins. That's how, like, their beards, just their faces look so much alike. What is all this talk about the people's confidence? Let the people merit my confidence. Nicholas II, 1916.
World War I was a disaster for Tsarist Russia.
Oh, that's putting it lightly.
At the front, the country suffered a series of devastating defeats, while at home there were food shortages and economic chaos. The Tsar was held responsible for the crisis. After all, he was now the army's commander-in-chief, and he was standing in the way of government reform. His German-born wife, Empress Alexandra, was even thought to be supporting Germany, while the entire family was said to have fallen under the spell of a Siberian mystic and faith healer,
God, he just looks fucking creepy as fuck, dude.
War I and Rasputin.
Ugh.
In December 1916, Rasputin was murdered by Russian aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents, both groups determined to end his influence over the Tsar.
Huh.
But in the eyes of many, the damage had already been done.
Is this actually a photo of Rasputin's dead body? Huh. Situation serious. There is anarchy in the capital. Government paralyzed. Chaotic shooting in the streets. Mikhail Rodzianko, chairman of the State Duma. I think I pronounced that last name right. I hope I did.
On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages. The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar."
Oh.
Troops ordered to put down the disorder mutinied and joined the protesters instead. Tsarist officials were arrested. Prisons and police stations were attacked. Emblems of Tsarist rule smashed and burned. The government had lost control of the capital. The Tsar was told by his ministers that order could only be restored and Russia saved from military defeat if he gave up power. So, on the 2nd of March, Nicholas agreed to abdicate. In just 10 days, 300 years of Romanov rule had come to an end.
Very nice. Well, not really. Oh, here we go. The Provisional Government does not possess any real power. Alexander Gushkov. Gushkov? Minister of War. He looks a little bit like Lenin.
The February Revolution had been remarkable.
A little bit. Or Trotsky. When did he look more like? He looked like a mixture of Trotsky and Lenin a little bit. Very little bit. Just a little bit.
Remarkably swift and bloodless, and hopes were now high for the creation of a more democratic, more just Russian state. Members of the State Duma, the National Assembly, had formed a provisional government, which was to hold power until a constituent assembly was elected, to give Russia a new constitution. But in reality, the provisional government shared power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council elected by workers and soldiers that controlled the capital's troops, transport, and communications. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Marxist Menshevik Party, was much more radical than the provisional government. Yet it supported the government's decision to continue the war and honor the commitments that Russia had made to the Allies. It was a
I honestly say that is the biggest mistake the provisional government made. I mean, they didn't exist long for them to really make any other mistakes. So really, it could be their biggest and only mistake. I don't know too much about them. But choosing to continue the war, while I understand it from, I guess, if you want to say from a geopolitical scope, because them perhaps staying in the war is what helped them, the whites versus the reds after the Soviets leave the war. And there's that civil war that happened between the whites and the reds following World War I, and pretty much a bunch of the world helps the whites, and the reds still come out on top. The provisional government's decision to stay in the war, while it makes sense to hold those allegiances, I think World War I for the Russians was a lost cause at this point, and I think you got to cut your losses and just accept the German peace deal.
Fateful decision that ultimately,
especially when you just overthrew the government that had been, the traditional government that had been standing for 300 years. The dynasty that had been ruling your country for the last 300 years. There'll be instability there. Probably, have some foresight and be like, all right, we need to focus on ourselves here. We can't continue a war.
they played into the hands of one of the smaller parties, the Bolsheviks. Their leader, Vladimir Lenin, recently returned from 16 years in exile, bitterly opposed the imperialist war. He also demanded the immediate redistribution of land, from rich landowners to peasants, and the transfer of power from the bourgeois provisional government to the people's soviets or councils that were springing up across Russia. The Bolshevik program was summed up in a simple slogan: bread, peace, and land. And as Russia's economic and military crisis
I love me some bread.
deepened, its appeal to the masses grew and grew.
Our tactics, absolute distrust. No support for the Provisional Government. Lenin.
In June, a new Russian military offensive ended in disaster.
I just love fucking Epic History's animation style that they've got going on.
With
Videos are
400,000
always
Russian
amazing.
casualties, massive desertions, and the collapse of army morale and discipline. In July, soldiers and sailors in Petrograd mutinied. They were joined in the streets by workers with Bolshevik support. But troops loyal to the Provisional Government opened fire on the protesters and dispersed the crowds. A police crackdown followed, leading to the arrest of several Bolshevik leaders, including Leon
That's Stalin.
Trotsky. While Lenin
Isn't that Stalin? That looks like Stalin. Oh. Since he didn't mention it, that's not Stalin. The more I look at him, I'm like, no, that isn't Stalin. God, it looks like Stalin, though. But yeah, that's obviously Trotsky's easy to spot.
by the help of Joseph Stalin,
It is Stalin! I knew he looked familiar.
fled to Finland, traveling with forged papers under the name of Konstantin Ivanov.
I've not, huh?
A socialist and stirring orator named Alexander Kerensky became Russia's new prime minister and was hailed as the man who would save Russia from anarchy.
Hang the German supporters and spies with Lenin at their head and disperse the Soviet. General Kornilov. Oh, that's a bit aggressive, don't you think?
The army's commander-in-chief, General Kornilov, believed Russia's war effort was being undermined by chaos at home and deliberately sabotaged by men like Lenin, whom he declared a German spy. So in August, he ordered his men to march on Petrograd to restore order. Bolsheviks played a leading role in the city's defense against this attempted military coup. Their most brilliant organizer, Leon Trotsky, was released from prison and sent armed Bolshevik militias, the Red Guards, to defend key points in the city. Strikes by railway workers, many of them Bolshevik supporters, prevented Kornilov from moving his men by rail, and his soldiers began to switch sides, or simply go home. The Kornilov Affair cast the Bolsheviks as saviors of the revolution. And by the end of September, they'd gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. In October, Lenin decided the time had come. He secretly returned from Finland to Petrograd and began preparing to seize power.
Here comes the October Revolution. It would be naive to wait for a formal majority for the Bolsheviks. No revolution ever waits for that. History will not forgive us if we do not assume power now. Lenin.
On the 25th of October, the Bolsheviks made their move.
They call it the October Revolution, but it happened closer to November.
Red Guards and loyal troops seized key points around the capital, and that night they stormed the Provisional Government's headquarters at the Winter Palace, an event later immortalized by Bolshevik propaganda and the great Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. Kerensky fled the city at the last moment, narrowly avoiding capture.
Ooh.
And the next day, at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin announced the overthrow of the Provisional Government.
If we are not ready to shoot a saboteur and a white guard, what sort of revolution is that? Nothing but talk in a bowl of mush. Lenin. Pretty aggressive.
The following months saw the Bolsheviks consolidate their hold on power, while fighting a brutal civil war against counter-revolutionary, or White Russian, forces who had foreign support.
By foreign support, they pretty much mean the entire Western world.
Some whites hoped to put Tsar Nicholas back on the throne. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family had been held under guard at Tsarskoye Selo, outside Petrograd, where they occupied themselves with gardening and other diversions. In summer 1917, the family was sent to Tobolsk in Siberia, where they lived under house arrest in the governor's mansion.
And I believe the reason they were unable to one of the reasons why they were unable to leave Russia is because Alexander's cousin, right? Is this Nicholas or I already forgot his name. He just said it. Whatever. The Tsar could not. His cousin wouldn't let him. You know, the King of England. What am I thinking? King of Britain wouldn't give his own cousin safe, like, wouldn't let him move in.
The following spring,
like
the Bolsheviks had the family moved to Yekaterinburg. In July 1918, as white forces approached the city, Bolshevik soldiers gathered the whole family in a cellar. The Tsar, his wife, their son Alexei, their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, as well as 4 servants, and executed them all. Russia's civil war was one of the 20th century's most devastating events. An estimated 2 million soldiers lost their lives, while a typhus epidemic and famine claimed the lives of a further 9 million civilians.
Yo, I've never heard the casualties for the Russian Civil War.
By the end of 1921, the Bolsheviks had emerged victorious, and under Lenin's determined and uncompromising leadership, set about building a new socialist order. The Soviet Union, created in 1922, emerged as a world superpower following the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. But it would always remain a single-party state, where all opposition or dissent was ruthlessly suppressed. Those brief hopes for Russian democracy that flowered amid the euphoria of the February Revolution were extinguished by the Bolshevik October Revolution and put beyond reach for decades to come.
This was well made.
Bridgman Images.
Epic History TV, of course, knocks it out of the park again. Yeah, that was the Russian Revolution of 1917. I think this was perfectly paced. The amount of information covered in 12 minutes was wonderful. No complaints. This was great. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed too. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.